Hey Kathy, I'm going to talk to you about Acts 1 and 2 of the Duchess of Malfi. I gave you a decent amount of background information slash summary, so I don't want to be redundant, but just a few things, a little bit of background information that's important. This play is considered a tragic comedy, and that is because the first three acts are pretty stand how can I say this? What we're reading about seems to be very tragic, and it's pretty straightforward. The Duchess is a noble woman who's widowed, and she wants to remarry, and her brothers forbid her from doing this. We never really get a good reason. At one point, or at a point in the play, it's said that this is to keep their bloodline pure and to get her inheritance, but these reasons are not considered compelling by critics, especially because the violence and the absolute lack of regard her brothers show for her cannot be explained just by them wanting to get her inheritance. They could still get her inheritance without torturing her so mercilessly. So it's called a tragic comedy because the first three acts are pretty straightforward. But then in acts 4 and 5, these strange things start to happen, which really create a different tone in the play. It sort of pulls the rug out from under you because you're not prepared. You're prepared for tragic, serious content, and then something really strange happens or something funny happens, and so as far as why, and it's kind of off-putting at first, and I'll give you some examples. So in Act 4, that is when the Duchess is killed, and she faces her executioners and her death very bravely. She doesn't try to get out of it. She tells her killers that she forgives them, and she's just not afraid. She's very brave. And after she's killed, her maid, Cariola, is supposed to be next. And Cariola understandably doesn't want to die. So she tries every trick she can think of, or every excuse rather. First she says that she's contracted to a young man, or that she has a date. Then she says she's with child. And then she tries to say that she hasn't prayed in a while. And none of these attempts work. But it's supposed to contrast two different human reactions to tragedy or to disaster. So first we have the Duchess's reaction. She reacts, she's very brave, very courageous. Cariola does not have the same reaction, and the argument is that not everyone gets to experience tragedy, that there are certain elements to a tragedy. That first there is special knowledge generated by suffering, and then there's also an affirmation of the dignity of the human spirit, and that those things need to occur in order for one to be tragic. I think I put that in the notes that I sent to you, but so the point is that Cariola's death isn't tragic, but the Duchess's is. You don't have to follow that argument, but I'm just putting it out there. I mean, you don't have to agree with that, but I'm just putting that out there for you. And then two more examples of funny or strange things. Towards the end, Ferdinand, that's one of the Duchess's brothers, he gets this disease called lycanthropia, which is not a real disease, but in the play, if you get this disease, you believe that you are turning into a wolf. So Frederick gets this, and it's kind of funny because we see him chasing his tail and chasing shadows, and that can't happen in real life, but it happens in the play. Something else that happens that's strange and funny. In Act 5, Antonio and Delio go to visit this ancient fortification, which also happens to be near the Duchess's grave. And as they're talking, her grave begins to echo their conversation. And it's not like an echo, it's the Duchess's voice. And even Antonio says something like, "Oh, that sounds very much like my wife's voice." So it's weird. It's bizarre because that can't happen in real life. But Webster has these little things like that in Acts 4 and 5. And one theory or explanation, because it's very much, one of my students described it as being on a roller coaster. So the absurd and up and down nature of the play is supposed to be emblematic of or representative of the absurd and meaningless nature of human life, which is also up and down and can't really be explained. So those are just two ways of looking at it. The tragicomic aspect. Let's see. So something else that's really important to know is that this is actually based on a true story. So there was a woman named Gianna, I forgot her last name, but she was Duchess in Italy, but she was Spanish, but she was Duchess in Italy. And she got married when she was very young. She was just 12 years old, and she was married to a much older man. And I believe it was 8 years later that he died. He died when the child they had together was 8. But anyway, when he died, she wanted to remarry, and her brothers forbade her from doing so, and she disobeyed them. Just like in the play, she and her prospective or her fiance, they fled to Ancona, and Gianna was actually apprehended by her brothers, and she was never seen again. And the understanding is that they killed her because they didn't want her, well, something like an honor killing, to preserve the family's honor rather than it be tainted by her attachment to someone of a lower status. So there have been several retellings of that story, and what's important to note is that in all of those other versions, the Duchess is made out to be this lustful, lecherous, immoral woman, and it's a cautionary tale about what can happen if we cannot control our desires and our passions. But in Webster's version, the Duchess is the good. She's the beacon of light and good, contrasted with all of the evil that her brothers bring and do, and she's the hero. She's the heroine. So that's really interesting because Webster definitely put his own twist on that, because again, in all of the other versions of this story, the Duchess is bad, she is immoral, she is lustful, and she gets what she deserves. So it's very interesting that Webster puts this spin on it. So something to think about is, let me rephrase. So it has been commented, it's noted by critics that Webster's desire here is to comment on status and class, and how those are unimportant, and how really it's a shame and it's wrong of us to put so much emphasis on class and status. And you will see many times throughout the play, for example, the word great men, great is used so much. If you put that in your head, I'm sure you will see it. And the very last lines of the play also directly discuss human greatness. And it's interesting because there are great men in the play, like the Duchess's brothers, the Cardinal and Ferdinand, who's a duke. And though they are great in terms of status and what they have, they're horrible people. And then the people who are, like Antonio is more of a great person. The Duchess is more of a good person, but so Webster is definitely commenting on the vanity of status and rank. And let's see what else. I think that's it. So as far as Acts 1 and 2, I just wanted to, in Act 1, the most important thing is the character of Basola, who was introduced. So when he kind of shows up at the court, and Delio and Antonio notice him, and they comment that he is the only court Gaul, or he's kind of like the only scar on the court. And so Basola, we learn from his conversation with the cardinal, he says to the cardinal, "I fell into the galleys in your service." And what that means is that we know that he committed a murder for the cardinal, and as a result, he had to work in the galleys, which is like a prison ship, and for 2 years. And it turns out that even though Basola did this work for the cardinal is slighting him, doesn't want anything to do with him, and we see Antonio and Delio notice this, and they comment that, well, Antonio says, "'Tis great pity he should be thus neglected. I have heard he's very valiant. This foul melancholy will poison all his goodness. For I'll tell you, well." So anyway, Antonio is commenting that the environment of the court will poison Basola, and I would just like to posit Basola here for you to consider as emblematic of mankind, because the Duchess is very good to the degree that's not realistic. She's a Duchess. She marries her steward. I don't know. And then her brothers are evil to the point that it's not very realistic. But I think Basola is more... to me, he doesn't really have any beliefs, so he kind of embodies the saying, if you believe in nothing, you will fall for anything. I think he's very much influenced by his environment and circumstance. So in Act 1, we learn that, he's just gotten out of prison, and also that marks him in a way and makes him a lesser person. So it's going to be harder for him to survive. And so Delio and Antonio are kind of commenting not that it will be just that it's a pity that he's being neglected or pushed to the side, and that he's not a bad person, but that the foul or bad nature of the court will poison him. And I think that's what happens. You can have a different opinion, but we see Basola saying that let's see, where is it? That he's determined to thrive. And he also comments on the brothers, the Cardinal and Ferdinand, just that they're bad people, and that there are lots of men who are their flatterers and just hang around them trying to get what they can. And Basola says that he doesn't want to live like that. And let's see. But then later on in Act 1, we see that the Cardinal and Ferdinand offer Basola a job. And yes, earlier in Act 1, they are neglecting him, but Ferdinand offers him a job spying on the Duchess. And Basola's first reaction is that he is not interested, and he knows that he's going to have to do something bad for it. He says, "Take your devils, which hell calls angels. These cursed gifts would make you a corrupter and me an impudent traitor. And should I take these, they take me to hell." So he knows that that Ferdinand doesn't have anything good for him, and that is going to lead him into trouble. But then he has stated earlier that he's determined to find some way to thrive in this environment. So he accepts this position. It's under the guise that he's taking care of the horses, but they're clear that he's going to live in the court and spy on the Duchess and know the men who come to see her and who does she seem to prefer. So Basola, his closing lines, well, he says, "What's my place? The provisorship of the horse? Say that my corruption grew out of horse dung. I am your creature." And that's lines 277-ish. But it's important to notice Basola's conflict, because he doesn't take the job right away. He's offered it, and you can tell that he doesn't really want to when he asks, "Whose throat must I cut?" And he says, "This will take me to hell." So he's calling it out for what it is, and we also know that, well, at least I would say that he's not thrilled about it, but again, he needs to find a way to thrive. So that's important in Act 1. And then also at the end of Act 1, we have a conversation between the brothers and the Duchess. And here they basically sit down with her and tell her that they do not want her to remarry. And she tells them that she has no intention of remarrying, but they tell her that widows always say that. And let's see. So there's one really interesting comment that the Cardinal and Ferdinand make. They tell her that, don't do this in secret, because your actions will come to light, and you may flatter yourself and think that in doing your own thing or making your own choice, by getting married secretly, you're doing something good because you're doing something different. And he says to her, Ferdinand says that you would just be like an irregular crab that walks backwards. So take a crab that's walking backwards. Picture that. So it's not doing anything special, right? It's just walking backwards. And that's what they say. That's what Ferdinand says to the Duchess, that if she gets married, she's not going to be doing anything special because she's following her heart. She's just going to be like the crab that walks backwards. Let's see. And what else? So the Duchess, or Ferdinand, also shows the Duchess a knife or a dagger. He does this at several times throughout the play, and it's the implication is that he wants her to kill herself. Now, after the brothers leave, the Duchess is alone, and she kind of talks to the audience. She says, should I be convinced by or compelled by what they have said? And then she compares herself to a soldier in a great battle who, in the presence of danger has achieved great and impossible things. And she feels like she's in that position where she knows she's poised to do something great, but she also senses that it's dangerous. And she tells us that she's choosing, this. She's choosing the dangerous route, and she's willing to give up her reputation. That's what she means when she says, more than my life, my fame. So, which is significant because throughout the play we see numerous points where mention is made of the common people, or what do the common people think of the Duchess, and they think she's a whore. So that's Webster with commentary on status and rank and title. But let's see. So the last thing I just wanted to point out to you in Act 1, Cariola has the closing. So the Duchess calls Antonio, and she pretends she needs him to help her write a will, but really she proposes to him, and he says yes. And so they're married. And Cariola has been hiding behind the arras or the curtains the whole time, because that way she's a witness to this, and their marriage will be legal and binding. And after everyone is gone, Cariola comes out, and she has the last lines of Act 1. Whether the spirit of greatness or of woman reign most in her, I know not, but it shows a fearful madness. I owe her much pity. So see, there we have the word great. And okay, so that's Act 1. And again, Cariola's just asking, like, is she great because she's great, or is it because she's a woman that she has this boldness in her? Okay, so Act 2, it's already been 18 minutes, and I'm afraid that I don't want to draw on and on and on and on and on. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to email this to you tonight, and just let me know if you would like me to go through Act 2, or yes, let me know if you want me to go through Act 2. Trying to think what happens in Act 2. So Act 2 is not terribly eventful. The most important developments in Act 2 are the Duchess getting pregnant and her brothers finding out. And then also Basola. Well, yeah, it's kind of important. There's a scene with Basola that's a little important. But I don't want to talk about Act 2 here, just because, again, I feel like I've already been talking to you for 18 minutes. So I'll send you Act 2 separately, and gonna